Hello and welcome to another Whispers from the Wood. In this episode I'm out foraging again, and I've come up to my local mountainside because I'm looking for a particular habitat to find a wild sorrel. Now, if you've been watching our videos carefully, you might have already seen two wild growing sorrels featured so far. The wood sorrel, which looks a lot like a clover, and then the common sorrel. Now the plant we're looking for is neither of those, but it's quite closely related to our common sorrel. I'm looking for sheep sorrel. And this is exactly the type of habitat that I expect to see it, because what we've got here is acidic soil. I'm on top of moorland, heathland, so there's lots of heather growing here, and plants like whinberry, they both like acidic soil, and so does our sheep sorrel, so we've got a good chance of finding it here. So I'm going to take a walk about now and see what I can find. Well, here we have the plant for all to see. Our sheep sorrel. Rumex acetosella is its Latin name, and very much like the common sorrel, if you remember the video that we made on that, when we eat it we get something that's quite unique to Britain. A strong, acidic, almost lemony taste, but I think like the other sorrels it tastes very much like Granny Smith's apple peel. It's really lovely stuff, something very much that is refreshing and just bursts in your mouth with flavour. That flavour is coming from the oxalic acid which is in the plant here, which if you eat in very large quantities is going to cause some problems, but you're not going to be eating this by the bucket load. It's the kind of leaf that you're going to gather and throw into a salad to give it a bit of pep and maybe boost some milder, more blander flavours. You could use it with fish very much. If you think of how we use lemon with fish, often putting lemon inside, you could put sorrel leaves in instead. It would go very well there with leaves stuffed inside the cavity of the fish and then roasted on the embers of a fire. Equally, you could chop up these sorrel leaves, maybe cook them ever so slightly just to break up their structure a little bit and release the flavours, not too much at all though, but then throw that into some yogurt and that would make a nice kind of like a raita, kind of a side dip or something for a meal. Yeah, it would work very well like that. It's a beautiful leaf, really, really flavoursome. But how do we recognise it? Let's pick one of the leaves out and give it a closer look. First of all, the whole thing is a low growing plant, whereas with the common sorrel, that grows into much more of a tall spike, and certainly at this time of year, in early August as we're in now, the common sorrel is a tall plant looking very much like a dock, and indeed the sorrels are related to docks and to rhubarb as well, so if you think of that acidic flavour of rhubarb, sorrel shares that a little bit, so there's definitely some likeness there. Now getting back to our sheep sorrel, as I said, it's a low growing plant, and the leaves are really interesting because if we pick one out we can see that they have three lobes to them, one very long which makes up the main part of the leaf, and then two smaller lobes jutting out almost at right angles to each other at the base of the leaf, and that's the real key identifier of sheep sorrel. You get this a little bit with common sorrel, but it's much more pronounced here. For any medieval historians watching, think of the shape of a halberd, which is an old medieval weapon on a long stick. It looks very much like that. One other thing to look out for, as we look at the top side of the leaf, you can see some long leaf veins running vertically up the leaf there, and that's quite distinctive. It reminds me a little bit of ribwort plantain. Not all the leaves have these points at the base, but they all have at least a hint of them, and when you look across the whole plant you'll certainly find the very characteristic textbook leaves like the one I've got here, and that'll give you a positive ID. The last thing to check though is the taste, and you can give it a little nibble and you get that burst of acidity straight away. It really is good stuff this. I recommend foraging for sheep sorrel. I don't know how much is going to make it back home. There's another good reason for getting to know sheep sorrel, and that's because it's got a long foraging season. It's August now and it's looking nice and fresh. It's nice fresh green growth that we're seeing, but you could see this fresh growth all the way from March at the start of the growing season all the way to the back end of autumn. And like any green leaf that we're harvesting, always favour going for the fresher, younger, more succulent looking leaves rather than the old tired ones. What's interesting to notice is that the lushest, most succulent leaves in best condition are those which have got a little bit of shelter from the wind. So this patch has grown up just in this little dip here, this divot, whereas just over the way we can see some more young sheep sorrel which is more exposed to the elements, and that looks a little bit more stunted and about half the size, but still no less tasty. So there we have it, sheep sorrel, another wild food to add to your arsenal. Do go out and have a look for it yourself. As I said, it's got a long season, so you've got a good chance of finding it in good condition. And do check in those upland areas, moorlands and heathlands, those acidic soils. That's where you're most likely to find it. So good luck, and I'll see you again for another Whispers from the Wood.